Beko zubi baserrira doan estrata, belar mantu batez estalia, harrizko esia bi aldeetan. Goizaldean esnatu eta estrataren amaieran zain egoten zinen, argia eskuan zeraman bizilaguna agertu artean. Han nonbait, ume baten lantua, urrutiago emakume adindu batena. Mendian goradoaz kontrabandistak, Garnie perfume markako bote ustuez betetako zakuak edo beste 11 gauza trenean urrunera perfume merkez bete eta berriro salgai jartzeko. Argipean doa ere alaba sasitarra berak dioen moduan, ezkondu aurretik ernatutakoa. Preso zegoela, Donostiako Ondarretako kartzelatik atera alizateko, zintzurra moztu zuen bere aitak. Alabakaren ahots aldatua gogoratzen du. Beti ahots aldatu hori. Zintzurra mozturik berezko ahotsak ies eta beste ahots bat sartuta. Eta erreketeak, eltzetsuak. Eta rekarteruak, estraperloan lortutako jakiak eta gailuak auzoetan salgai jartzen zituztenak. Eta auzoko festetan nola mozten zieten burua olioei igitaiarekin. Animaliak lurrean egindako zulo batean sartu ostean. Eta Mikaela izandakoak nola estrata hori egingo zuen ere, hartaldiaren bila joan, eta haiek behera eramateko, menditik jaisteko. Oinutsik jaisten zen, eta soinean zuen gona zabal eta luzea igo, eta zutik egin oizuela pixa. Eta pixa zutik egin oizuen ere, behintzat bazka prestatzen zuen bitartean. Zutik, gizonak bezala, animaliak bezala. Pixa errekak lurra zulatzen du, hats zuria gora doa. Zain, zerbaiten zain, pazientzia ere jaten duen hotzaren erdian. Neguko belarmantua pixarekin zeharkatzen, gorputza azpimarratua. Ixiar Rozasen beltzuria idazlanaren pasartea. Ataskora etorri zen pertsona bakoitzak arrazoi bat zuen etortzeko, eta horrek pizten dit interesa. Normalean manifestazio batera joaten zarenean, arkaldarrikatzen duen ideiarekin edo ideologiarekin bat zatozelako izaten da. Zioen Lópezek konferentzia batean, ataskoa lanari buruzko galdera bati erantzunez. Proiektu hori 2005an egin zuen, Aralarren, eta herrialde osoko eta jatorri, talde, komunitate, klase, adin eta genero desberdinetako personak bildu zituen. Baita hura antolatu zen Intza udalerriko biztanleak ere. Elkarren aurkako ahotsak ere izan ziren bertan. Alde batetik, automaitaleak edo bildumagileak, beren auto zaharrak erakusteko joan zirenak. Eta bestetik, ekologistak. Ekitaldia autoaren kulturaren eta hark eragiten duen kutsaduraren aurka egiteko aukera gisa ikusi zutenak. Proiektu honetan talde ekologistek arrazoi politiko argi bat zutela badirudi ere, artistaren helburua ez da izaten artea eta aktivismoa lotzen dituen proiektua sortzea. Interes handiagoa du eredu mikrosozialetan. Hortxe aurre ikusten eta eraikitzen baititu pertsonen arteko topak eta ustekabeko intimo eta paregabeak sortzeko aukerak. Artelan orok sortzen du errealitatearen esparrua iraultzen duen soziabilitate eredu bat. Eta beraz, ekoizpen estetiko baten aurrean gaudenean, galdera hau egin diezaiokegu geure buruari. Ematen aldit lan honek elkarrizketa bat ezartzeko aukera. Existitu alko nintzateke zehazten duen espazioan. Nola? Nikolas Borriodek bizikidatza irizpidea proposatu zuen 1980ko hamarkadako artea, arte erlazional gisa definitu zuenean. Borrioden arabera, arte praktika hoien xede teorikoa, gizakien arteko harremanen esparrua eta haien testu inguru soziala lirateke, espazio simboliko, autonomo eta pribatu bat berrestea baino gehiago. Artelanak bere ingurune fisikoarekin, hiritarrarekin, sozialarekin, politikoarekin eta ekonomikoarekin, eta testu inguru historikoekin erlazionatzeko daukan gaitasuna, eta publikoarekiko hartu emana, funtsezkoak dira halaber Lópezen lanean. Horrekin lotuta, Lópezen lana estetika erlazionalen esparruan sar daiteke. Nola nahi ere bere proiektuen oinarria batipat gizakien arteko harremanetan bitartekari izatea bada ere, bisualitatea eta forma ere artistaren proiektuen zati garrantzitsuak dira estetika erlazionala formarekin lotuta. Jaigiroko topaketak antolatzen ditu, edo ekitaldietan oinarrituriko proiektuak mikrosozializazioak sustatzeko. Sozializazio horiek beti dute alderdi bisual indartsu bat, eta espazioaren antolakuntza formal handi bat. Eta horregatik esaten dugu artelan berezi eta paregabeak direla haien emaitza. Maider Lópezen tokia aldatu idazlanaren pasartea. Ixiar eta Maider orentxe izango dira gurekin, Iñigo Astizekin solasean.
Now we are going to start the conversation with Ixiar, Rozas, Iñigo Astiz, and Maider López. Well, good afternoon and welcome. And also welcome to all of those that are following on streaming this conversation. Thank you very much to Iñaki Astiz for that wonderful reading of those both texts. As you know, this year, this literature festival is about nature. And so we're going to see how the grass grows today. And it's not fully a joke. We're going to have with us Ixiar, Rozas and Maider López with us. And at the end of this conversation, to be able to make questions if you want to do so. Please, if you want to do so, raise your hand and we'll provide you a wireless microphone. Ixiar, Maider, thank you for being here with us. Talking about Basque literature and nature, this makes me think of a poem that says that the human being is forced to manage a hostile environment and to melt with nature. I'd like to know when you felt that need yourselves for the last time to sort of melt yourselves with nature. Maider says that I often feel that I sort of mix or melt with nature and trees. Me too, says Ixiar. Recently, I was in López in a mountain, and I found a bump into a big male sheep, and it was, well, quite a shock, really. It was a very animal moment. I guess your activity can be compared to Mossen, because then you were painting in the, well, in a toile, then you were in a canvas, then in a wall, and then all over nature. And I guess your subject now goes all around the world, and you are creating spaces everywhere in the world, creating particular spaces, and this is why you are very popular also abroad. In 2011, you got the Euskadi Artean Award. So her print is in many places of the world. So we're going to see literally how the grass grows. In fact, this is a piece of work called Watching Grass Grow. It is a work from 2016 by Maider, and this takes 21 days. And through these days, we see the grass grow. We're not going to be here for 21 days, of course, but I found this interesting because this would sort of approach us or get us closer to this observation of nature. Ixiar, do you still feel as a writer, you are also a performing arts researcher, you are also a teacher for teachers, and you've been working in theater, poetry for children. Your latest novel is titled Belzuria in Basque. And you've also wrote an essay, exercise of occupation, life and work, together with Kim Pujol. And many of you might know that she also works in the field of the materiality of language and voice. And I would say that also her texts are very much related to nature. They are sort of like a trout, because like this fish, this is like the support for the work, but it's also very slippery. Why do you think it is worth to watch the grass grow? Why do we have to pay attention to nature, really? Well, I've just said very well, this is a video that shows real time how grass grows. Because nature is in constant movement. A tree moves constantly. It grows both horizontally and vertically. But that movement is so slow that we're not able to perceive it. And also, I think we should see the nature in its real size. This video was for a large format in order to change our viewpoint and adopt the viewpoint of an insect, of a little creature. This is kind of as if we zoom nature and we sort of make larger what there is in nature, and we increase its scale. So in this particular case, we make grass look bigger. This is a 21 days video, and sometimes you have the impression nothing is going on. It looks like a still image, like a picture, but then suddenly the wind blows, and then just a little piece of grass sort of moves, or a water drop falls, and then they become the main characters in this video, the main actors of the video. And here we are telling about how the grass grows, but also there's like a parallel story being told by some animals, by cats, by the wind. And suddenly very detailed things, small things happen and they turn into big events. So why should we pay attention to nature? Well, to see how very tiny things might trigger big things. And also to see how our viewpoint can change. We measure the time. It is the time that takes the grass to grow. But also, your look changes. It will be easier to record everything and then go for time lapse. Yes, I've been asked that. No, it was real time. I don't want to make it easier for observers. No, you see what there is, what really is going on. This doesn't turn into a show, and I've seen it in time lapse, and it's very nice because you see constant changes. But if you give nature its real time, I think this is a very important way to observe nature. Yes, also it is important to sort of move away from the human dimension, from human scale. Yes, she says, this we did it in a Basque farm, and we organized everything to record outside, to shoot outside the farm. And the fact that grass was something so common, still, it requires many things to be shooted, many gigabytes to store the recording and then to treat it, to manage it, to process it. And that was very interesting that we were in a beautiful place, but then suddenly we'd all go inside the farm to watch a video. And then also you see how you read things differently through screens. So then you say, why are you looking at the grass through a screen when the grass is out there in front of you? How about you, Ixiar? Well, I saw this work by Maider. And I think that realizing about these little things increase your curiosity. You've said that there is something that is not really human, rather animal. It is true that when we see this, you increase your attention. And this is something that art does, that really fits imagination. Also, well, David Henry Thoreau, we're paying homage really to this author, and he said in the book that we cannot allow ourselves not to live in the present time. And I think these kind of works that pay attention to tiny details sort of take you back to the now, the here and now. That's fed by many past moments and also by future moments, the here and now. And that is the utopia, really, at the end of the day. We're talking about utopias. We're talking about nature that need to return to bodies, to your body, that micro-socialization that is mentioned in the text that was read by Iñaki, to move back to that micro-world. Yes, that is also said in the beginning of your work, Ixiar. Yes, I would say that it starts with that kind of observation, observing small things, feelings, impressions, sensations, situations, and also nature. With the feelings I feel when I see nature, and then I have to name all those feelings and sensations. As we say in Basque, what has a name has a reality. Then things change. And maybe that relationship in between things and names ends up sort of changing completely. And I really like that. You've said that I do a research on language, on voice, on the rhythm, and the sound of words, the sonority of words. That is related to nature and also to us, that we change constantly. We are part of nature, as Xavier Lete said. Who is going to, well, deny what he says, so say that. In the history of art, we always talk about the imitation of art as a way to measure the skills or the art within a piece of work. This is like the classical Greek painters. They were trying to do their best. One of them was painting some raisins, and then some birds came and wanted to eat those raisins because they looked really real. Another painter, he covered his painting. So the first one told him, well, show me what there is behind that veil. And the other painter said, no, no, there's no veil. This is a painting of veil. So this will be the main goal of arts. How do you see this idea of imitating nature? Yes, in the history of art, it's been a long tradition of getting close to nature and then copy nature. And then also to be in the nature and sit underneath a tree and copy nature. There is a long tradition of people going outdoors and sort of trying to melt with nature and copy nature. So following this tradition, for example, in Turkey, I undertook a project where I would approach nature. I would not try to mimic nature, but rather seize the colors that I would find in a particular place. So we'd go to a mountain and I would see a particular color and I would like to copy it. So then we sort of produce a brochure with all the colors in a natural space. So is it about imitating or not? Well, that's a game. I don't really imitate, I try to do something different. Ixiar, one of the things you do also is to imitate nature. And often we talk here about this return to nature. You've mentioned Thoreau's book. And this is enough to see that ideal of return to nature. That is quite successful. How do you live that dream of returning to nature? Why do you think it is such a trend, so fashionable? Well, Ixiar says, I think this is just something that happens every so often. Maybe when society goes through a crisis, I don't know if it is the crisis itself that is something that happens every so often. But, well, there's always this need to sort of run away from civilization. But art has always been sort of trying to imitate or represent art. And it is also a tool to represent art. It's also true that when we talk about nature, we live really in the nature that's really tamed. And there are few places that we can call by their real names because our landscape is full of cement, of roads. So the places that we can call after their real name are really few. And then we have a very romantic idea or ideal image of nature, and these two things sort of live together. And I think in this post-industrial society, with this evolution where we moved from a rural society to an industrial society, we need benchmarks to sort of see the way that we've got to follow. And those sorts of guides or benchmarks could be many artists, like we have here, many artists in the Basque Country that work with nature and with the landscape. Nature and landscape is not exactly the same. A landscape is construction, is how you look at nature, how we look at nature. And then there are some artists, like Maider herself, she works with that, or maybe Yvonne Mendizabal, or Aramberri. And they're very critical in their representation of nature. And this also happens in literature. So I guess in every language, in every art language, you need some references, some guides to name things. This is why you go so much for a walk. You go for a creative walk. If you've read her text, this idea of a walk appears again and again, the paths, the alleys, the roads. So always walking in the middle of nature. What does walking mean in your literature? Well, to me, going for a walk is a need. I also like to go for a walk in a city. In fact, I live in an urban environment, but walking in an urban area, I like it, I enjoy it, and I think it's very healthy for your mind and your brain. I think we're going to show some images because I'd like to talk precisely about one of my works that is related to walking.
Nizu paseoarena zuzen ere Beltzuria liburuan ere hitzen arteko.
I was asking you about walking because in Beltzuria, in your last work, you're also sort of walking through words. Yes, I'm going to talk about the different alleys, that is stratak, alleys or paths that you have in between different Basque farms. And to me, this is related to geology, and I give it a different meaning. And in this work, I went on walks with different people, local people, with people from Etalar. We created different situations. I was trying to sort of collect everything that was happening on those walks. Those people were trying to walk, to talk. Then I would sort of filter that through my ears. Many things were happening on those walks through the alleys that separate, that go from a farm to a farm. And then as I was writing the book, I would also take my car to go from one place to another, would hear them talking about their families. And that image that I brought here is there because to me, language is like a landscape. To me, there are lines. When you write, I rather write than talk about literature. Everything is related to lines. Also, knitting is related to a text, precisely text and tejer. In Spanish, knitting are related. When you are writing, you are looking for something. Same as when you are walking. Sometimes you are just like wandering around. Sometimes you know your way. Sometimes you don't. And same goes when you are writing. So this is like this explosion of a verse. I work with Leonardo Garcia and Ixiar Aramburu, and I had this idea of a kind of an explosion. I did this under Word formats, but they did much better. They are designers, and I am not a designer. And then there is this other image that shows stone, limestone. And in the book, there are words that I heard there that were invented in Basque language. Well, the image has been done by some illustrators, not by me. Then here you see another part of the book, and there the text creates some kind of labyrinth, some kind of landscape. Well, you said that languages are also landscapes. In fact, Belturia, that word, is only used in a particular place. And Belturia is really a geolocalized word. Well, I did not undertake linguistic research, but this word is used in Etzalar and in the French Basque country to talk about the weather when it is very dark, before storm. It's got also many meanings because it means also anger, then I added more meanings to it, meanings that I invented, and this is part of my freedom as a writer. Well, this could be good to write a PhD thesis. Well, yes, if somebody likes it. Well, I don't want to dwell too much on this. I could give you further details if we have time, and I could talk about different projects about walking. Yes, later on we could maybe talk again about this subject matter. Maider, you also go for walks often. Now there is a beer ad, and two guys are sort of tasting a beer in a meeting. And you go for a walk, but you go for a walk in a very serious way. You always go to a particular place to do a deep research of that place, to see what you need. Usually you go to natural spaces. So why is it so necessary to listen to places? What do places tell you, and especially on how we act in relation to nature? Why is it so important, the relation between people and nature? Well, as you have said, to me it's very important to see how people relate to spaces. I want to see how we can read in different ways same spaces, how we can also transform, change our environment, and also how we sort of, we human beings sort of allocate a certain scale to things, to nature and to spaces, and also how we relate to our environment. That's one of my lines of work. This is an image from Turkey, where there are 25 people in 25 peaks. It's a very special landscape. It is a work that was done in very special places, and those same 25 people then go into one of those heights. And these two actions to me, show the different ways we inhabitate things. We could all live together, or each one in a different house. And this sort of sets different ways to relate to each other and to relate to nature. And I think people, we sort of grant a certain scale to nature. In fact, I would not be able to define the size of these mountains if there were not people in there. So this is sort of, by being there, we allocate a size or a scale to the landscape. I'd like to mention another piece of work, traffic jam. The text that was read previously talks about this work, and I'd love to have written that text, but it was written by a curator at the Istanbul Biennale. To organize, I call upon people to come to a hill and create a traffic jam. Usually when you go to work, you find a traffic jam, but you don't find usually a traffic jam when you are on holidays or on your leisure time. So we did the opposite. We sort of created on purpose a traffic jam in a small village in the region of Navarra to create this kind of impossible situation. Then we were also talking about cars and about getting a crowd, people from many different ideologies, and people came with a very sort of environmentalist attitude or idea in mind, thinking this was a very powerful way to protest against cars. We also see the 600 car lovers. They came here to sort of show their cars. They're not against cars at all, rather the contrary. So everybody came for different reasons, and we all gathered there. And in such a way, you read landscape in a different way. And as I've said previously, you grant a different reading to the landscape. And in such a way, you can also talk about leisure time. This is an impossible traffic jams, and people look upwards and look downwards. But suddenly, if you are intending to visit a cave, a well-known cave, you might bump into a traffic jam, into something similar. So this is how we study, how we relate with our environment. And in the text also it was said, and I find it very interesting, that you might create temporary collectivities, both the environmentalists or the 600 lovers. They got there together with locals, and that gave place to a temporary community that then will vanish and was there only for a while and then will remain only in our memories. Yes, it is a beautiful place. No wonder all those people wanted to attend. Some years ago, on the way to Aralar, something similar happened. There was a big traffic jam that happened because the weather was super nice, it was a long weekend, and people went in thousands to Aralar. Did you know about that? Well, I just provoked that traffic jam. This is why not all the cars look in the same direction, and the title says this is an impossible traffic jam. As Ixiar said, to see how we create our leisure time and how we relate in an ideal way to nature that might be shown here.
Tutalekuari, zure novelan Ixiar berdin, ez? Oso etxalarren kokatu.
Both of you work with the spaces. Ixiar, you've mentioned Echala. You've talked also about Istanbul and Turkey and Navarra. So how do you make the decision on this particular space work needs? Or using words from the environmentalist, how to produce a sustainable piece of work, and then how to read that landscape. Well, as you have said, we try to see what is the most appropriate for a space. I experiment spaces and places. I see how people move around, and I devote lots of time to that. Wherever I go, I have an idea in mind for a project, but I might go there like a year ahead to think of what I can do in that place. And then, depending on the context, my intervention can be very big or very small. I was invited to Austria, to a place where an artificial lake was going to be built. I was invited to something on the river, on the lake shore. I suggested rather to make a mountain with the earth that was taken out of the lake when they were digging in the lake. So it was turning a negative space into positive space by means of this hill that we created. And these hills grant you a different viewpoint of the landscape. You've been talking about taming nature. In our cities, well, mountains and hills are turning into parks. If something in a park is very steep, has got more of an 8% of of angle of tilt, then they sort of make it flat. Well, you also sort of create layers. Yes, in Belturia, says Ixiar, and in other works, there is a direct relationship with my mom's hometown. For many years, I knew that I was going to write a book titled Belturia. Then many years went by until I wrote that book. But for many years, that book was in my mind. And in that particular case, ecology is a use of language. I didn't write a thriller. The thrillers from the Baztán are very fashionable. I've been told, why don't you write a thriller? Well, I can't really write a thriller myself. There's been a search, a deep search, and I could not give you all details here, but I've been trying to write using a very poetic language. The story is quite dark, death is very present. So I've been trying, I don't know if successfully though, I've been trying to sort of keep that darkness very poetical. And then there is another work that I've been doing with the loudspeakers at the Concha. So this is about recycling, but also there we see a clear will to sort of run away for the ordinary formats of writing. So you plant a seed and then you let it grow somehow, he says. Well, a long time ago, I realized, and you know it perfectly well, Iñigo, what it means to take a word into a space. To me, that search is constant. It is on paper, but then I want to take it to a space. To me, speciality is very important, and I'm always looking for ways to tell words. And I like to sort of dig deep into those questions. Yes, I'm going to talk about that work, about these loudspeakers in the Concha. This was a very short work. It was done very quickly. It's like an anecdote. But it wasn't an anecdote to me because I work in important subject matters. This is a way on how to say a word in a high voice, loudly. So I received an invitation from a project called Observatory to Listening. This is a project from Europe, promoted by Europe. And then I was invited, to me, and other people also were invited, also Maria Salgado, a poet from Madrid. And we were invited to intervene, to do something with the loudspeakers at La Concha. So they wanted us to do sort of sound works that could be used with the loudspeakers at La Concha. So during the summer, in August, in La Concha, there is a beach in San Sebastian, these works will be used in the loudspeakers. So we would intervene for 2 weeks. First, she for 2 weeks, and then me, myself, for 2 weeks. The first thing I was wondering then, in relation to nature, was what could we say through the loudspeakers in August in the beach of La Concha? I mean, imagine if you say there are sharks. Well, you know what will happen. Well, it is in the afternoon, on prime time, as you can call it, lots of people on the beach. What can you say, really? And to me, that is a landscape from my childhood. I am not from San Sebastian, but everybody from Lasarte, where I come from, we all go to La Concha, to the beach. So what could I say? It was very difficult to make a decision, so I decided to do 2 things. One of my works is a part of Balchuria. It's a text with many different versions. And I decided to go for a new version for the loudspeakers. And I tried to create a sound landscape through that text. And then it will have different layers. And different magnifiers. Well, you know, usually loudspeakers are used to just tell messages, and sometimes something they work okay in Spanish, and then in Basque it doesn't work at all. Well, usually, so a loudspeaker is merely to communicate something. So Maria and myself, we were playing with those different senses or meanings of communication, and we were trying to sort of drill it. So that was one work, and then the other work was in Spanish. And at the time, it was released a report on torture by Paco Echevarria and his partners. And to me, La Concha, it is a splendid place, but then I see the Hill Urgol, the statue of Jesus Christ, and all the things that happened over there. And to me, it was necessary to talk about torture, not directly. It is a text in Spanish about silence based on repetition. So what did I do to make this short? Well, I had 7 days for every piece, and every day it will be 30 seconds longer. So the whole work would only be heard on Sunday. And that project, that was done very shortly, in a very short time, made me think of how to say things in such a place with all these specificities that I've mentioned. I said in the very beginning that your texts are like trouts because you sort of try to catch them, but they're slippery and they try to sort of go away. And also, in your case, then you have these texts that grow like moss. You start with something small, and then it grows into a hill. So since both of you have in common that sort of trend to expand, when did you expand from a book into, or from a canvas into the outdoors? When did your literature or painting explode? Well, since I've been doing art, I was always outdoors. When I was younger, when I was studying, I was already into getting out of the frame. I was thinking about the relationship in between painting and the outside world. Then I began to talk about the unusual spaces in a museum, like corridors, like dark corners, and then also to see how people relate in public spaces, the ability of people to create public spaces. Then this is related to the importance of places and on how to choose what I want to do. I remember that in Cappadocia, it is a spectacular landscape. It is a landscape that changes constantly. There is a superficial layer that erodes very easily. Wind and rain is constantly changing it, eroding the landscape. Every year, the landscape is like 1-2 centimeters sort of more eroded. So I didn't want to compete with such a spectacular landscape. And then I wanted to work on that continuous change of landscape. This is why I suggested we went walking every day through that landscape. Same as when you go here to the hills, you pick up a stone and then you will drop it somewhere else. And then with a picture of the original space, and then another picture of the final space, and with the coordinates of both the spaces, I would then sort of compare that movement. So I would change some stones, I would take them from one valley to another, or within a same alley. I would sort of have a stone next to a snail, or maybe stones were together, and then I would take one of those stones and leave it alone somewhere else. So the change was important. Tiny changes, but to me they were important. A stone doesn't move by itself. Animals, people, we are able to move, but stones do not move. They need an external element to be moved. So these changes, even though they are invisible or very, very tiny, they do not happen naturally. With these little movements, I make nature move in a way that I can measure. And out of these small transformations, I get a meaning. And even though these things happen at a very small scale, they might have a very important impact. For example, a volcano in Ireland might have an impact all over the world, and that happened. Yeah, that volcano that sort of prevented many planes from flying. Yes, that is what happened. So a little change that led to a huge transformation or to a huge impact. Then you have to confess where you dropped that stone and how you put it back to its in its original place or location. Yes, you can do that with the GPS. Ixiar, what did you do? As Maider was speaking, I was thinking about those moments. Well, I don't know if there was a particular moment, because you also started writing regular tales. Yes, fiction, she says. Yes, credible fiction. But then I began to wonder or to question different things, like what kind of words do, what kind of voice do. I was sort of questioning these things. I was wondering these things. And then I wanted to do sort of a performing work with a text, with my voice over the text, but it didn't work very well. So some 20 years ago, I tried to do this, yes, some 20 years ago, or 18 years ago, but it didn't work out very well. I still have those sorts of questions in my head. I've been through many things related to the scene. And physically also, I know what I am, even though I would never say I do a performance. Maybe tomorrow I might say so, but because we all change. But I am not a performer. And I learn a lot when I take my word into a public space. Not as now, where we are here sort of in a discourse, But when you search something else, I think it happens to you as well, Iñigo, in your text, when you are looking how to say things, experimenting new ways, or testing yourself. You've been talking about, he says, about Martandik, and we've been talking about walks. There we see the physical traces of Maider in Turkey and also Ixiar. She also wrote landscapes. Writing in the landscape is also a way to go for a walk. So I think, what did you do in Martandik without really being literature? It is a creation, though. Ixiar says, well, I've got to explain that Martandik, well, I am part of a group called Asala, and in 2015 we decided to organize an itinerary. Well, I'd like to explain that Asala is an experimental creation space in a small village in Alaba. Yes, some years ago, 2 years ago, it was granted the Artea Award. Yes. Okay, so together with Aitor Izaguirre, and as I've said, Asala is on the hills. So we went out walking all the way from Bilbao to that place in Alaba. It took us 4 days, and we went through many places. And we went through our landscape, and we could see all the changes in the landscape. I've never seen such bad alleys or paths. And one of those was one of the worst ever. In spite of that, it was a beautiful walk, and this year we're going to do it the other way around, from the hills all the way to Bilbao. In fact, we've been invited by a project called Prototipoak. I could later give you further details on the project. So if you later, and this is to the audience, if you want to make questions in Spanish, English or Basque, it will be okay. We've got simultaneous translation. So let's keep on talking about this relationship in between literature and the landscape. Once I was interviewing Peio Lizarralde, a Basque writer, and he has a very detailed and relaxed way of writing. He needs like 5 pages to say how, to explain how a drop of water drops or fall, or a snowflake falls. And something that struck me is that he said that some writers put a character in a forest, and in the next paragraph they're already in a bar. So he said, you know, you cannot like move that fast through a forest. You've got to sort of follow the rhythm of your steps. So to me, it's interesting to see how an artist sort of crosses your own, how the artists cross their own forest with their art. Well, how we cross them, or how would we like to cross them? Well, I do it slower and slower. I identify with fully with what Peio Lizarralde says. On the lack to cross forest barefoot, full of oak trees, for example. Or a beach forest. I really like walking barefoot on the grass, and we've got beautiful forest full of grass or moss. How about you, Maider? I think I would rather look at people crossing that forest. And you've been mentioning the relationship in between the beach and the forest. And in relation to these, I'd like to share with you an intervention that I did. Here we see an image of a regular beach with people walking, some people sunbathing, some playing beach rackets. And then there is something that is not very common. There, every towel is red. How come? How come everybody on a particular day went to the beach with the same exact towel? Is that possible? So one day we went to the beach, and when people were approaching us, we would sort of give them a red towel they could use that day. And that made the situation be read differently, and also the landscape be read differently. So I wanted to mention this idea because in a particular moment we stopped giving towels. So people kept coming and didn't know what happened. And a lady, she came and she started shouting out loud, "I don't have a red towel, can I get in?" So I was laughing. And then later on I realized that that was very important, because that person, she realized she was not part of that community, but she wanted to be part of it. So with a small action, you can really transform people. Usually, when you go to the sea, you look back, and according to the color of your tower, you know where you are. Or thanks to the color of your tower, you know where you are. And here we have this idea of a temporary collectivity. And then some other people came without red towels, and everything got too complex. Okay, do we have questions in the audience? Please raise your hand if you want to intervene in Spanish, Basque, or English.
45,6 edo lako zerbait izango da.
Gracias, Ixiar y Maider.
Well, thank you, Ixiar and Maider. I'm going to make my question in Spanish, sorry. I know Ixiar's projects, and I've seen your latest projects as well, Maider, and I really love them. So when does the shape appear? Because I see a balance in all of them. It's never too formal. There are encounters, there are experiments, and in the latest project, shape becomes an experience that is like sort of turning everything upside down. You said you go, you observe, and it's the context itself that sort of tells you what materials you can use. And in the case of Turkey, and I saw how you displayed that in a gallery in Madrid and also in a geological museum. It was fascinating. So I would like to know, in the case of the traffic jam and in the case of Turkey, whether the form, the shape, appears while you're doing it, whether it is a consequence of it. It is the best way to avoid making it too formal. So it is so balanced that I'd like to know about this process. Well, your question is a very good one, because effectively, the experience is very important to me, the experience of the place, as well as what happens in these collectivities. But in arts, in social art, in the social aesthetics, the form or the shape is something that is just residual to experience, but this form, this shape is very important to me, and it complements, this is complemented by people's experience. But when you ask me when does it appear, for example, traffic jam, it came when I was in Ixiar, and I was imagining that place full of cars. So it was the form or the shape that made everything happen. Because I'm a very visual person, I don't talk that well. I don't come from the world of literature, but I am very visual. So to me, the form is very important. That is to say, form is very important, and I am glad that you say directly without formalism, because everything that happens is very important. So in traffic jam, you have a picture, a photo, and then you imagine that impossible situation. And then we've got all those people that came due to environmentalist reasons, then some people that came to drink cider. We also have the experience of listening to the birds, and all these experiences are sort of living together at a very important level to me. Are there further questions? Did I answer your question? Sorry, he no longer has a microphone. We cannot hear him. If there are no further questions, a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers. And then the Guttensoria will go on tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, talking about literature, arts, and return to nature.